Hey everybody, we've got a special treat for you today. We have the man himself, Daniel Negreanu, here for an interview. This is really exciting for us.
Oh, yeah.
He's a fun guy. We're really excited. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Hit the gym. Good boy on doing the shortcut to shred workouts. So life is good. Playing soccer tonight. I'm a 26 for life. That's my goal.
That sounds pretty good. That's what Jonathan's trying to do too.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to live forever. So,
Right.
Good job.
I guess it's important, especially when you're on TV all the time, which you are, and that kind of is the first question. You've played a ton of poker on TV. Have you found that really good players make adjustments to you based on what they've seen on TV, and have you had to adjust in kind?
Absolutely. It's a great question, really, because there's probably more clips of my hands on YouTube than any other player. So I have to be very mindful and aware of what have my opponents seen, right? Okay, so these guys have watched high-stakes poker. I know that. They're not going to try to bluff me, are they? Because they know I don't fold, right? So it's really important for me to readjust to what they're doing. Now, having said that, there are some players, especially some of the newer mold, that are just, they play GTO. Mm-hmm. They basically don't try to exploit my weaknesses. So against players like that, making adjustments isn't necessary. However, against most of the top players who play exploitative, especially in tournaments, I have to be thinking in terms of where do they think I'm going in terms of my strategy and how can I mess with their heads. It's really a leveling war and it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, in particular, I remember some leveling wars you and Lex Veldhouse had. Those looked pretty fun on the big game. Those were good times.
How about with bad players, or maybe bad is the wrong word, but amateurs, right? So they watch you play too, but they may adjust, but they may adjust really differently than the pros. So how does that affect you and what you have to do?
So one of the things I'd say that I'm proud of is my ability to adapt well to the amateur fields as well as the high-level playing fields. When I play against high rollers against top competition, I take more risks because I know that they're necessary. I have to push smaller edges. I have to take lines that are a little more risky, right? Against amateurs, I typically take a much more small ball approach where I'm not going to make the big mistake. I'm not going to run the big three-barrel bluff against an amateur who I don't even know if he understands, that I always have it here, right? Without information, I'm going to play a very basic, small ball strategy of poker and expect them to make mistakes, frankly, not doing much bluffing. And this is going to be true of most every really top-notch player. When they play against weaker players, they don't depend on those players being smart enough to fold. And if you are, it's a big mistake.
That is really good advice for everybody, actually. That makes a lot of sense. So those guys might not give you the toughest decisions you've had. And this might be a bit of a tough question, but what is the toughest poker decision you've ever had? Can you think of the singular toughest?
Tough to come up with one off the bat. I actually just played the Aria High Rollers this weekend and have about 15 to 20 hands I wrote down that I'm going to put into a podcast. So maybe it'll come out of that one. But, man, over the years, think about how many complex decisions you have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it's hard to, frankly, it's just hard to come up with just one.
That's fair enough. So you had a pretty incredible run recently, getting second in the one drop and then the deep run in the main event. And you're a guy who's been in pressure a lot in poker. But did you feel particular pressure in either of those moments more than you usually do in the bright lights, the big stage?
I'll say, so the one drop playing heads up against Dan Coleman, I was as calm, cool, and collected during that tournament as I've been in a while. Before day one started, I said my intention is to win it, and I was very clear that I was going to, and I felt it. I really believed it. So getting heads up with Dan, the only thing that was distracting, frankly, was we didn't have high denomination chips. So every raise was like, the min raise, you had to put 2 chips in. So the problem with that was when you'd win a pot, now I'm looking down, stacking my chips, and as he's looking at his cards, I don't get to see him as much. So that took away a little bit because there's one specific key hand with King Queen where I called him that there was a tell available that I saw that I didn't trust, that I knew from before meant he had it. But just the theory and based on the way the hand played, I trusted that over my read. So I don't know that I was nervous for that, but the chip thing was the only issue. As far as the main event goes, I wouldn't call it nervousness, excitement, because I think fear and excitement are the same emotion. When you're afraid and you're excited, it feels exactly the same. So I chose to be excited in that moment. I really was. Like the hand I was all in, I'm just jumping, I'm jumping. I fell to the ground legitimately.
Yeah.
My head was out of it for a little while. It was not like Phil Hellmuth dramatics. It was legit. No, I was super exciting because I could feel the electricity. The Thunderdome was packed. I sensed the monumental moment it was for poker, right? For me to have me. I'm not oblivious to the fact that me making the November 9 was a big deal. Like the producers of the show, ESPN, they were all rooting for me. They actually, can share this with you, it's the November 9 when there was 11 left and I was still in and I was getting short. They're like, do you guys think we can make it to November 10?
Wow.
We were discussing stopping at 10. And I said, but then they scrapped that idea because they knew that from an integrity perspective, I wouldn't be okay with that. Like I wouldn't be okay with just making it 10 because I'm there. Unless everyone else agreed to it, that's fine. But if anyone objected, I wasn't okay with that.
Right. I kept saying how ESPN must be so upset right after you busted. They must have really not liked that very much.
Pictures of Ty Stewart, literally with his tie going like this.
It makes a lot of sense, actually. It could have been a huge moment for poker.
So I know for almost everybody, busting the main event is sort of the thing that I know for me, like I chew over and chew over and chew over. So busting 11th, how long did that stay with you compared to busting in any other big tournament that you've been in? Because you played obviously $1 million buy-ins sometimes.
Well, what's funny is I didn't even think about it till I busted, but in 2001 in the main event, I came 11th as well. And I was chip leader with 12 to go. So I was like 11th again, huh? As far as like in that moment, I enjoyed the experience so much that I was actually experiencing joy, oddly, just in terms of how awesome it was. The days leading up to it, it really didn't sting. Like in that moment, it stung, right? But then a minute later, once I realized I was out, I was like, okay, I appreciated the applause. I appreciated the support I was getting. And it didn't really faze me the way that I would have expected it to. Like I look back, I wrote a blog about the key hands that I played and a couple mistakes I may have made. Not the last hand, although 99.9% of poker players will tell you the last hand I played was incorrect. Mm-hmm. But I'm standing firmly that calling with the ace-4 in that specific situation. This is why I appreciate your video so much, is because you're cognizant of the fact that every situation is different. And I was looking at game texture. What's going to happen in the next hour, right? He's going to be raising every button. So if I'm calling my blinds to see flops with him and I'm not flatting with an ace occasionally, it's just very exploitable. So I needed to throw in some ace rags into my calling range as well. So it made sense to me, but that's besides the point. As far as how long it took, not very long. I mean, I was over it pretty quickly.
That's good. That's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
Because that would have haunted me for a while, I think. But again, I don't have your resume. So there's a lot of angling in poker, and I'm sure you've experienced a lot of it yourself. Is there a time that you've been angled so badly that it just stuck with you? Do you remember a specific angle?
Man, not even, less angles against me, but angles I've seen other people shoot against other people.
Sure.
When they do it against me, it's kind of, I don't take it, it doesn't bother me as much as when they do it to people that I feel like they're exploiting. Like there was one time in a poker tournament, I don't remember the details, but it was a Russian guy who didn't speak English really at all. And there was a situation where there was an American pro who took a shot at him by, re-raising him. And then the guy was trying to explain himself, and nobody was defending him because he didn't speak any English. And the floor man was about to rule in favor of the angle shooter. And I stood up and I yelled, you can't allow this to happen, da 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 da. And I think the guy appreciated it because, again, talk about being voiceless. He doesn't speak English, right? And, you have to be careful of situations like that. I've heard in the old days, when people were playing at Aviation Club, the English players would get taken advantage of, or vice versa, just because of language barrier issues. So I always feel it's important to stick up for people who get angled, that can't really voice it for themselves.
That makes sense to me.
Just out of curiosity, how was the woman angling the Russian player?
Oh, it wasn't a woman. It was a guy. It was an American.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember, but it was something about he bet out a turn. Right. Oh, yeah. So it was one of those spots where, he bet out a turn. This was before this rule changed, I think. Bet out a turn. The Russian guy, called the bet. Mm-hmm. And then he raised him. I'm like, you can't, so basically, out of position player throws out 100. The under the gun guy calls the 100. The guy takes his 100 back, now puts in 200 and says, it's because it's a bet, because the action wasn't on him. So he was trying to get an extra bet out of him in a limit tournament. And I was like, are you serious? This is ridiculous, Yes. Shaun Deeb also is a massive angle shooter. Whew.
Really?
This guy, he did the same kind of thing. In a Raz tournament, the final table against the guy who's another pro, Shaun's board is 3-5. The other guy breaks into 3-queen. So in a Raz game, it simply works like this. The 3-5 bets, the 3-queen calls, or maybe, or folds. Just standard. The 3-queen is never betting, right? Shaun goes to reach for his chips, but hadn't bet yet, right? So the guy throws out the bet to call because he knows it's going to be a bet. And now Shaun check raises him. I was like, hey, dude, this is some shady.
So how did you feel about Shaun Deeb's slow roll of Mike Matusow?
I hate Mike Matusow with a passion. So
Okay.
Him suffer and feel pain.
All right, fair enough.
Is that new, or has that been like that for a while?
We'll call it a couple years. He screwed me for a large sum of money, and he's also completely lost his mind and is obsessed with fake news.
Okay.
Yeah, seen that on Twitter,
Yeah,
actually.
definitely have seen some of that stuff going on. Yeah.
All right, moving on.
That's some funny information.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff there, huh? What is your biggest poker-related regret?
Poker-related regret would have to be 2001, the main event, the World Series of Poker that Carlos Mortensen won with 12 players left. I was a chip leader. This is a different time, different style of play, but the blinds were 5 and 10,000. Carlos opened for 35,000, 3.5 blinds under the gun, which is like what people were doing back then.
Yeah.
It's normal. Then this guy, Henry Nowakowski, re-raises like boom to 150,000. Sizing is insane back then. Right? And I looked down in the big blind at ace king, and I hadn't had any hands throughout the tournament. I never had aces or kings, and I was chip leader in a spot, and I decided to re-raise. Carlos folded nines. The guy got it only with sixes. Came jack 10. I bricked out, but it cost a very significant amount on my stack. So looking back on that same situation, I think that what I know now about the game, I would have folded that ace king because it just wasn't worth the risk because I was doing so well, small balling, and I was much better than most of the opponents. So that would be a regret. But again, in the moment, I just didn't know any better that this was a fold.
That makes sense. So you were talking about how you were better than most of the players there. Who do you think's the best current no-limit hold'em player in the world? And I know tournament and cash are kind of different, so you can kind of pick or choose.
Well, I mean, it's really difficult to say, right? Obviously, if you look at the results in tournaments for the last year and a half, 2 years, Fedor Holz comes to mind as a guy who's done really well. The thing that's dangerous about looking at these sample sizes that I think people are underestimating is the size of the fields, right? He's obviously had some good scores and some big field events, but it is not statistically improbable when you're playing 30 to 40 player fields to see this happen every year. We had Dan Coleman go on this insane run. People said, oh my God. Before that, it was Eric Seidel, crazy. Now imagine this. Take 30 balls, right? Take 30 balls out and take out 5 every time, right? You'll find that some of the balls come up way more often than others, and people are going to go. There's going to be times where it's like the 5 ball finished first, second, and third, or fourth and fifth, and people are going to go, wow, the 5 ball must be really, really good. Well, this is like destined to happen. I know that, not to compare, but I guess to compare, the year that I had in 2004, the results I was posting was in 400 to 500 player fields. There was no 30, 40 player high rollers. Now, if you take into account, high rollers are good. So to beat them, you have to play at a high level. Having said that, there's nobody that good that can do it without winning flips in key situations, without hitting some flops, without getting a little bit lucky. It's not like the tier of Fedor Holz compared to everybody else is so outlandishly large. A lot of it has to do with confidence. The guy's been winning everything, so people play a hand against him, and they're like, they're scared. So he has a psychological advantage, right? He may just be playing the best as a result of that. But the results are not indicative. Like I heard on a podcast, people like, so pretty much easy to say that he's the greatest of all time, right? And I'm like, okay, well, Fedor, I mean, he's obviously awesome, but it's a freaking year and a half, okay? Let's see if he's still crushing in 4 or 5 years. I think the possibility exists, but a little early to give him the crown as the GOAT already.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's not Tom Brady yet. That's good. Where do you rank Phil Hellmuth?
Phil Hellmuth is a guy that's been around a long time. He was very good during his era at exploiting amateurs and using his bully tactics. Phil's weaknesses lie against other top super high roller type pros. Those are not fields that he's going to thrive in long term. He hasn't made the adjustments necessary. There's a lot of fundamental flaws in his game, especially short stack, that are just far too exploitable for some of the best players. So if you put him in a field of these super high rollers, I would not put him down as one of the winning players. I know he's going to hate me saying that, but I don't think he's plus EV, for example. Despite the fact that he came in, the final table of the Super High Roller Bowl, I don't think that he's plus EV in those tournaments. But nobody wants it more. No, nobody's trying harder than that guy.
That's clear. That's definitely clear. So you've probably played a ton of these high rollers, and this play might have come up in there, but do you remember the best play you've ever made that you just felt so good about afterwards?
Well, there's a couple. There's two that come to mind. One is actually from the Super High Roller Bowl, where Nick Schulman was doing commentary and just sort of made it seem nonchalant, like, this would be a good spot for Daniel to raise. I'm like, I raised, I put on an amazing bluff, and it's like, go home, because Nick saw it coming. I'm like, yeah, but it's a good one. But really what really speaks to me was 2003, Freddie Deeb, hand against him. We were playing heads up in the showdown at the Sands, and we were so deep. I think we were like, 200 blinds deep, heads up. It was insane. Deep structure. And there was a hand, make a long story short, I don't even remember the details, where the board was like king high. I put him on ace king value betting the river. And I raised him on the river, knowing that he probably wouldn't call with a one pair hand. He folded, and I showed ace seven. So, and then like I showed it, and after that, he was like just blown away by it, and I just whittled him away. So, man, I don't even remember the details of the hand. It's been a while.
Yeah. I feel like you played a hand in that tournament against him when you guys were heads up, where there was a straight on the board, and he bet and you raised as a bluff, and that worked too. Like, you were able to push him around pretty well.
Freddie Deeb and I would actually say that of all the players in the game, the one that has a style that most mimics mine was Freddie Deeb. So I really had an understanding for what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do. And poker's all about self-awareness and understanding also how, how does this player perceive me, and what do they think I'm going to do? So I was pretty aware of what Freddie felt, and so I knew that he didn't expect me to pull a big bluff like that, so the situation was ideal.
Cool. So you've played a lot of people like Freddie Deeb who are really kind of outlandish characters, which is fun, obviously. Have you had any experiences in live poker that are just like really crazy? Like, what's your craziest live poker experience?
Man, those are always the toughest questions, because I've been around for 20 years, played the game in so many different cities. The craziest moment in my, man, it's just the first thing that comes to mind. It wasn't even playing, but I was watching Ted Forrest and Hamid the Smalchi, who was a world champion from way back when. They were playing heads up Raz 8 and 1600, and I would go play at noon, play 20-40 limit hold'em. I'd go home, come back at noon, and they're still playing. They played for like 3-4 days, and Hamid was drinking, smoking, chewing God knows what, and taking God knows what types of drugs. So then they were in the middle of a Raz pot, and like 6th Street hit, Ted bet, and Hamid just was like literally just passed out to the point that they had to bring a stretcher to wheel him and take him to the hospital, because he was like, who knows how many freaking pharmaceuticals were in his system and cocaine and I don't know whatever other drugs those people did. So that was definitely a first for me, seeing somebody like literally get, wheeled out on a stretcher. That match.
That sounds like some old school Vegas stuff right there. That's what it sounds like.
Big time. So one of the things I noticed in your Full Contact Poker podcast, like you had a podcast recently where you were talking about a number of hands you played, and you seem to be, unlike a lot of pros who have some exposure anyway, more willing to talk about mistakes you've made or ways you might want to play the hand differently and things like that. What's the play that you've made that you wouldn't want anyone to know about because it's sort of the most embarrassing thing you've done?
Okay, well, my first World Series of Poker ever, I'd won a bracelet in 1998 in the Parliament of Hold'em. So now I'm in the main event, right? The main event, the big show. And I get 2 8s against John Bonetti. I don't really remember the pre-flop action, but I remember the flop being ace, ace, deuce. And I have 8s. And he ends up getting it. He goes all in, and I call with freaking 8s. He shows ace, jack. I walk out. This was before you had to show your hold card so you could keep him facing. And people were like, what the hell did he have? I mean, what, ace 9, ace 10? They all assumed. And I'm like, I just felt like such an idiot. I got so owned because I know John Bonetti had this wild, crazy image. And that much later I realized, like, that was so stupid. These guys with wild, crazy images, they put all their chips in on an ace, ace, deuce board. What the hell do I think? How do I think 8s are ever going to be good? It was just the most ridiculously stupid call I've made. Plenty of them. Yeah, plenty of them.
That's a good story. So you might be like in the middle between the old school and new school guys, but as far as the guys who played like high stakes poker season 1, like the old school guys, you seem to be the guy who's adjusted the best, at least that I can think of. What is it that keeps you ahead of the game? How do you adjust better than those other guys?
first and foremost, respect. Respect for the younger generation that's working hard. Because at one point in my poker career, I was that younger generation that was working hard than all these older guys. And I would look at them and go, these guys suck. They just think, oh, these young whippersnappers, this 3-betting and crazy aggressive stuff, not realizing that the game's passed them by. So I remember being really young and saying, that's never going to happen to me because I'm going to take in whatever they're doing. And I also have something else on my side, and that's wisdom that can only come through age and experience. There's so many poker concepts that I was doing for the last 10 years that the young kids would laugh at, go, he's defending with like only 15 bigs and he's got 9-10 off. And it's like, actually, they did the math on it and I was 100% right. My bet sizing in the early 2000s was min raising and close to min raising, and people thought, so stupid, he's not even coming in with a real raise. And now everybody's doing it. So first and foremost, self-awareness also of just realizing that, okay, if you stay stagnant and don't continue to improve, other people pass you by. So I could be here, right? Like, an example, in 2004, my game compared to the average was like this. I was so much better than everybody else in terms of poker, right? Well, my game today is here, right? I'm better than I was then. I'm much better. But the problem is the gap is like this now. So the gap has gotten smaller despite my games improving. And I expect that to continue till I die. But I'm always looking at what the young guys are doing specifically and trying to see like how advanced. Like some of the guys that have really impressed me recently is Nick Petrangelo. Plays a completely wild maniacal style that's very difficult to play against. It's like so against small ball in every way. But I find it fascinating to play with him, and I think I do learn a few things.
Cool.
So you've played so many hands in big spots and in huge buy-in tournaments, and I'm sure many huge cash games. We've seen that on TV, and I'm sure lots that have never made it on TV as well. Do you ever feel like when you're bluffing and you're waiting for the guy to either call or fold, do you feel just completely calm, or do you feel nervous at any points, or especially in big spots?
It's funny you mentioned that because I think it was 2003. We did a show. It was at the Sands, or no, it was in Atlantic City where they hooked us up to heart monitors. Okay. By the end of the show, they ended up calling me the Ice King because my heart rate stayed right around 72 beats the entire time. There was one specific hand where I was up against Mike Matusow, and we were all in on the flop. He had the exact same hand I did. It was 9-7 against 9-7 on a 9-8 deuce board, and we got it all in. My heart rate was at 74. His heart rate went from like whatever it was to like 160. Right? He was just like trembling with, and that's something that partly because I don't drink caffeine, I think helps with my resting heart rate. Also because I'm a vegan, I don't have high blood pressure. So if anything, it's on the lower side. So in those moments, that all helps me, I think, to be more calm than the average person. Like when the chips are in and I put them in, I know that if the person calls and I lose, I still have a good life. It's fine. And if you can't separate yourself from making big bluffs, from what it means if you lose, then you're in big trouble if you want to be a professional poker player.
I'm sure that's very useful, especially when there's the big stage and everything. A lot of guys, I'm sure, get really nervous, like Matusow did there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or everybody else.
Yeah, or everybody.
I mean, I would say you're known for having a particular, this like friendly, happy demeanor. You're willing to talk to people. I'm friends with Mike Matusow, and he told me many years ago about how you guys were playing in a World Series event, and you were on his left, and it folded to him in the small blind, and he limped. And this was years ago, and you said, "No, I really like that. I like that you're doing that because this way keeps the pot small because you're out of position against me." And this is before the flop came out, and you were sort of giving a running commentary of the strategy with him as you guys were playing hands together. And it's just like, nobody does that, but you did that, and something about that is incredible. Like, why are you like that? How are you just built like that, or did you adjust for poker?
I've always been that kind of personality. I was always a joker when I was in school. In the first grade, I remember messing with people all the way throughout my life. I've been confrontational, not afraid to jump in. And, part of it was learned in the sense that when I first moved to Vegas, I looked at what pros were like that did it right. The guys that they'd start playing, the tourists would come in, they didn't just sit there and not talk to them and, disengage. They asked him, "Hey, Bob, how have you been? How have your kids? You here for the weekend? You seen any shows? How long you here for?" "Oh, cool." They chatted with them. They engaged. They joked because they understood that they're in the entertainment industry. They really were. They are offering a service to tourists who want to play against some of the Vegas sharks. And if those tourists don't enjoy the experience, they're not going to play. And that's lost completely on a lot of the online poker generation because they don't understand. Like if you play online, you don't see the people. So they quit the game. You just sit out. You know how that feels if you have to look at somebody? Imagine you're in a 9-handed game. One guy leaves and he's still there and everyone goes, okay, we're done. You just basically call the guy a sucker. Nobody will feel that way. It's just, so there was a lot of understanding of how important it was to play that role. But really, it's just me being me. As a benefit, I think people generally have more fun playing just by me having more fun. And I have more fun in games like that when other people are engaged and chatty rather than, not engaging at all. It's boring.
Right. You're also really fun to watch because of that. So that helps in a lot of ways. It's really cool. So, Daniel, thank you so much for being here. You have a podcast yourself, the Full Contact Poker Podcast, and you're launching a YouTube channel. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I've obviously had fullcontactpoker.com for a long time. We've added a podcast. We've got 10 in there. One, I think, is a strategy one where I break down some hands, much like what you guys do. The others are kind of one-on-one interviews and different things with industry leaders as well as players. If you've suffered from depression or anxiety, Nick Schulman, I did a podcast with him where he shares a lot about that. So really enjoying doing the podcast. In addition to that, as all part of what's happening in the Full Contact Poker, I'm releasing Monday tips on YouTube. Just kind of like 3 to 5 minute tips on like how to play jacks or how to play the early levels. And then on Thursdays, I'll be doing hand breakdowns, much like what you guys do, some of the stuff, your content, which is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
And occasionally, I just released one. I'm going to do vlogs, sort of a day in the life of. I shot one where I was at the 25K at Aria, like a 20-minute thing. It's a little longer. And I'm enjoying it. So my plan this year, one of my goals was to do more on social media. So for all things social media, fullcontactpoker.com would be the spot to find it.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Daniel, for coming. It was great to have you.
All right.
True pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching our interview with Daniel Negreanu. As Daniel mentioned, we make multiple videos each week where we break down a hand from television, either with famous players or fascinating decisions. Click here to check it out.